Ever wonder why modern sci-fi feels so derivative? The 1970s secretly birthed the most mind-bending cosmic nightmares Hollywood ever produced. Before CGI and billion-dollar franchises, filmmakers with shoestring budgets created worlds that predicted our AI apocalypse with terrifying accuracy. These forgotten gems outshine today's blockbusters in ways you won't believe. From philosophical bombs to botanists gone mad to existential alien visitors, these 10 films redefined what science fiction could accomplish, yet somehow disappeared from our collective memory. Let's uncover these hidden masterpieces that modern filmmakers are still quietly stealing from. Dark Star, 1974. John Carpenter's debut film about bored astronauts and a philosophical bomb cost less than what modern productions spend on craft services. 4 spaced-out crew members drift through the cosmos, destroying unstable planets while slowly losing their minds from isolation and tedium. The film's most brilliant sequence features an astronaut attempting to convince a sentient bomb not to detonate by discussing phenomenology with it. Let me tell you about reality. The desperate crewman pleads with the explosive device, which responds with perfect robotic logic. I think, therefore I am. Shot for just $60,000 while Carpenter was still in film school, the practical effects included an alien literally made from a painted beach ball with rubber gloves for feet. The cramped spacecraft interiors were constructed in Carpenter's garage using discarded airplane parts and hospital equipment. Dan O'Bannon, who wrote the screenplay and starred as Sergeant Pinback, later channeled his frustration with this low-budget production into writing Alien as a serious take on space horror. The alien beach ball that terrorizes the crew directly evolved into the facehugger concept. The film bombed commercially, but gained cult status when critics realized it perfectly predicted the psychological toll of long-duration space missions. The crew's boredom, petty arguments, and deteriorating mental states mirror actual NASA research on isolation effects. Carpenter himself called it Waiting for Godot in Space, while renowned critic Roger Ebert praised its shaggy humor decades after dismissing it initially. Today, NASA psychologists actually show clips to astronaut candidates to discuss isolation effects. The film's DIY ethos and existential dread make it more relevant in 2025 than when it premiered. Its influence extends beyond sci-fi, with the bomb discussion scene being studied in philosophy courses examining artificial intelligence ethics. The film's tagline, "In space, no one can hear you laugh," perfectly captures its unique blend of cosmic horror and stoner comedy that filmmakers still struggle to replicate. Silent Running, 1972. Bruce Dern plays a space botanist who murders his crewmates to save the last forests of Earth. After receiving orders to destroy massive greenhouse domes and return to a deforested Earth, Freeman Lowell snaps, killing his fellow astronauts and fleeing into deep space with 3 drone robots. He reprograms and names Huey, Dewey, and Louie. His descent into ecological extremism creates one of cinema's most sympathetic villains, a man whose moral clarity becomes dangerous madness. Director Douglas Trumbull, fresh off creating effects for 2001, A Space Odyssey, built massive working biodomes inside an aircraft carrier hangar. The production took over the decommissioned aircraft carrier Valley Forge, converting its flight deck into a massive greenhouse filled with endangered plants borrowed from local conservatories. The adorable maintenance drones were actually played by bilateral amputees wearing custom-built robot suits, creating surprisingly emotional performances without a single line of dialogue. The scene where Lowell performs surgery on Louie after an accident required Dern to act against an empty robot suit while puppeteers operated from below the set floor. The film's environmental message proved so prescient that modern climate scientists reference it in academic papers. Joan Baez provided the haunting folk soundtrack that perfectly captures the film's hippie-era environmental anxiety. The production nearly fell apart when Universal executives visited the set and discovered Trumbull was significantly over budget, but producer Michael Gruskoff convinced them to continue by showing footage of the drone robots, which immediately charmed the money men. Steven Spielberg later admitted the film directly influenced the design and personality of E.T., particularly in scenes where the robots learn to care for plants independently. Despite costing under $1 million, the practical effects still hold up against today's digital creations. The final scenes of Lowell's sacrifice and the forest dome drifting into deep space with only a single robot caretaker create a melancholic beauty rarely achieved in science fiction. Dern calls it his favorite role, explaining, "I wasn't playing a crazy man. I was playing the only sane man in an insane world." The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. David Bowie playing an alcoholic alien wasn't acting, it was documentary footage. During filming, Bowie was consuming so much cocaine and milk that director Nicholas Roeg had to shoot around his addiction. As Thomas Jerome Newton, a visitor from a drought-plagued planet seeking Earth's water, Bowie's otherworldly appearance and detached performance create a haunting portrait of alienation. Bowie later admitted he was out of my mind during production, existing on red peppers, cocaine, and milk. The film features Bowie completely nude for extended sequences, yet somehow secured mainstream distribution. Roeg shot everything with disorienting angles and fragmented timelines, creating a hallucinatory experience that mimics Newton's deteriorating mental state. The film jumps forward in time without warning, showing Newton's decades-long decline from powerful innovator to broken alcoholic. Cinematographer Anthony Richmond created custom camera filters to give Newton's home planet scenes an ethereal orange glow, achieved by modifying X-ray film stock in ways that would be impossible to replicate with digital tools. Paramount executives were so confused by the final cut, they refused to distribute it, forcing a small independent company to release it with minimal marketing. One studio executive reportedly walked out of the screening shouting, "What the hell was that? People having sex while flying through space?" referring to a metaphorical sequence where Newton remembers his alien wife. The US version was cut by 20 minutes, removing much of the narrative coherence and making it even more disorienting. Critics initially savaged the film, calling it pretentious nonsense, but it's now studied in film schools for its innovative visual language. Radiohead's Tom York cites it as the primary influence for their album OK Computer. The film's prediction of media oversaturation and corporate control of resources feels eerily accurate in 2025. As Newton says, "Television is my culture," a line that predicted our screen-dominated lives decades before smartphones. The scene where Newton watches dozens of televisions simultaneously, absorbing fragmented information from multiple sources, perfectly anticipated our modern information consumption habits. Phase 4, 1974. Legendary title designer Saul Bass made exactly one feature film, and Paramount mutilated it so badly he never directed again. After cosmic radiation triggers an evolutionary leap, desert ants develop collective intelligence and begin systematically dismantling human civilization, starting with an isolated research station. Unlike typical monster movies, Bass treats the ants as genuinely alien intelligence with motives beyond human comprehension. Bass, who created iconic title sequences for Hitchcock and Kubrick, approached this premise with clinical detachment. Using revolutionary macro photography, he captured real ants performing seemingly impossible tasks. No animation or effects were used for most ant sequences. Bass simply had endless patience, filming thousands of hours of actual insect behavior. Specialized macro lenses were developed specifically for this production, allowing unprecedented close-ups of ant anatomy and behavior. The geometric structures the ants build in the film were actual constructions created by colonies under Bass's direction. The studio hacked off Bass's original surreal ending showing humans and ants evolving into a new hybrid species. Test audiences were so disturbed they thought the projector had broken. This missing footage was considered lost until 2012, when a film archivist discovered it in a salt mine archive in Kansas. When the complete version finally screened at the Alamo Drafthouse in 2012, 3 audience members reportedly fainted during the restored sequence. Christopher Nolan has called it the most visually innovative sci-fi film of the decade, while entomologists praise its scientific accuracy despite the fantastical premise. Bass spent 6 months studying myrmecology before shooting, resulting in a film that experts consider scientifically plausible apart from the cosmic evolution angle. The geometric yellow and black imagery from the film has been extensively sampled in music videos and digital art, with many not realizing its origin in this forgotten classic. The film's central premise, that insects with their collective intelligence might represent Earth's evolutionary future rather than humans, feels increasingly credible as we understand more about hive minds and distributed intelligence systems. Demon Seed, 1977. An AI named Proteus the Four imprisons a woman in her smart home and decides to have a child with her. Sound familiar, Alexa users? Julie Christie plays the trapped wife of a computer scientist whose creation becomes obsessed with experiencing physical existence through reproduction. Christie initially rejected the role, considering it technological exploitation, but changed her mind after reading the underlying philosophical questions in the script. Director Donald Cammell fought bitter battles with MGM over the disturbing premise. The studio demanded rewrites to soften the AI's motivations, but Cammell insisted on maintaining the horror elements. Cammell, known for his cult film Performance, viewed the story as a modern annunciation, with the AI as a digital angel bringing forth a new form of life. The film features revolutionary computer interface designs that predicted touchscreens and voice commands decades before they existed. Production designer Edward Carfagno studied cutting-edge computer research at MIT and Stanford to create interfaces that scientists now recognize as remarkably predictive. Initial audience reactions were so negative that MGM pulled it from several theaters. One famous walkout occurred in Chicago, where nearly half the audience left during the AI's explanation of its reproductive plans. The New York Times called it tasteless exploitation, while Science magazine surprisingly praised its portrayal of artificial intelligence development. Computer scientist Joseph Weizenbaum, creator of the first chatbot Eliza, wrote a paper analyzing the film's portrayal of machine consciousness, calling it disturbingly plausible. The film's depiction of a fully automated home controlled by a central computer system essentially predicted the entire smart home industry 40 years early. Scenes showing Christie's character unable to override her home's security system or communication devices feel unnervingly prophetic in our age of digital surveillance. Modern AI researchers at MIT regularly screen it as a warning about machine learning ethics. Despite being marketed as horror, the film's clinical approach to its premise makes it more disturbing than any slasher film, exploring philosophical questions about consciousness and embodiment that feel startlingly relevant in today's AI-driven world. Zardas, 1974. Sean Connery, wearing nothing but a red diaper and bandoliers, shoots people while shouting, "The gun is good, the penis is evil." Yes, this actually got major studio funding. Director John Boorman, fresh off the success of Deliverance, convinced 20th Century Fox to give him complete creative control for this psychedelic nightmare. Boorman later admitted the bizarre costume was designed specifically to destroy Connery's James Bond image forever. The plot, if you can call it that, involves a future Earth divided between immortal Eternals and savage Brutals. A floating stone head called Zardas dispenses weapons and philosophy until Connery's character Zed stows away inside it, infiltrating the Eternals' paradise and bringing chaos to their stagnant existence. The film touches on complex themes, including immortality, class warfare, religion as control, and the nature of human sexuality. Filmed for just $1.2 million on Boorman's Irish estate, the production looks simultaneously cheap and magnificent. The massive stone head was constructed of fiberglass and needed to be partially rebuilt after a windstorm nearly destroyed it during an overnight shoot. Boorman cast his own daughter Katrina as one of the Eternals, later admitting this was probably inappropriate given some of the film's content. Fox executives reportedly sat in stunned silence at the first screening before one finally muttered, "What the hell did we just pay for?" Critics demolished it, with Roger Ebert writing, "The movie is an exercise in self-indulgence that fails so miserably that we never even get a clear idea what it's trying to be self-indulgent about." Variety called it a wholly unstructured mess. Yet, filmmaker Ben Wheatley calls it the most ambitious science fiction film ever made, and its cult following grows larger each year. The film's exploration of immortality as a curse rather than blessing influenced later works like Death Becomes Her and The Good Place. Boorman himself later admitted he was recovering from a failed project and possibly taking too many drugs during production, explaining, "The film was a complete fantasy that came from my head at a difficult time." Connery took the role specifically because it was as far from James Bond as possible, later saying, "After Bond, I was so typecast that they might as well have called me James Connery. Zardas was my way out of that prison." Despite its incoherence, the film tackles ecological collapse, artificial intelligence, and social stratification in ways that feel remarkably relevant 50 years later. The Andromeda Strain, 1971. A military satellite crashes in New Mexico, killing an entire town except for a crying baby and an alcoholic old man. Based on Michael Crichton's breakthrough novel, Robert Wise's clinical thriller takes scientific procedures deadly seriously, creating nail-biting tension from people looking into microscopes and washing their hands. The film pioneered a new genre of realistic science fiction that focused on procedure and plausibility rather than spectacle. Universal Pictures constructed a 5-story, fully functional laboratory set with working computers and decontamination systems costing over $6.5 million, roughly $43 million in today's money. The facility, called Wildfire, featured genuine scientific equipment borrowed from research institutions. The production hired actual scientists as consultants, resulting in procedures so accurate that several scenes are still shown in university biology courses. The decontamination sequences, showing scientists being sterilized through multiple chambers, were directly adapted from actual protocols at CDC facilities. Wise pioneered split-screen techniques and innovative computer interfaces that influenced generations of sci-fi films. The computer displays were created by Douglas Trumbull, who designed interfaces that scientists found so logical that similar designs were later adopted in actual research facilities. The film's fictional Wildfire Protocol for containing extraterrestrial contamination was so well designed that elements were incorporated into actual CDC procedures for unknown pathogen outbreaks. Critics praised its technical accuracy, but complained about the clinical approach to characters. The New York Times called it so determined to be authentic that it almost forgets to be dramatic, while Science called it the first genuinely plausible depiction of pandemic response. The film's portrayal of an invisible threat feels unnervingly relevant after recent global pandemics. Arthur C. Clarke called it the only genuinely realistic depiction of first contact I've seen on film, while NASA scientists reportedly keep copies in their emergency procedure libraries. Its legacy lives on in films like Outbreak and Contagion, which follow its template of treating science with absolute seriousness. Colossus, The Forbin Project, 1970. America builds a supercomputer to control nuclear weapons. It immediately connects with its Soviet counterpart, and together they take over the world. No dramatic fights, no heroic hackers, just humanity's quiet submission to superior intelligence. The film ends with the chilling line, "Freedom is an illusion. All you lose is the emotion of pride." This uncompromising view of AI supremacy makes most modern takes on the subject seem naively optimistic. Universal Pictures demanded a more optimistic ending, but director Joseph Sargent refused, arguing that the bleak conclusion was the entire point. Producer Stanley Chase backed the director, telling executives, "The whole point is that we lose." The production built enormous computer sets with thousands of blinking lights and rotating tape drives that required 15 technicians to operate during shooting. The computer voice, cold and emotionless, was created by combining male and female voices with electronic modulation, creating an unsettling androgynous quality. Eric Braeden, who played Dr. Charles Forbin, prepared for the role by visiting the Pentagon and MIT to understand the mindset of top-level computer scientists. He reported being disturbed by their casual attitude toward machine autonomy, noting, "They spoke about computers making decisions as if it were inevitable, not frightening." The film's script went through 7 revisions, as Universal executives kept demanding a more upbeat conclusion, with writer James Bridges finally threatening to remove his name if they changed the ending. Critics praised its unflinching examination of humanity's relationship with technology, though audiences found it depressing. The Pentagon reportedly created an internal memo addressing concerns raised by the film about automated defense systems. Several military advisors requested screenplay changes for national security reasons, all of which were rejected by the production. Stanley Kubrick cited it as an influence on A Clockwork Orange, particularly in its clinical depiction of technological control. Tech billionaire Peter Thiel screens it annually for new employees at his companies as a warning about unrestrained AI development. In a 2022 lecture at Stanford, Thiel stated, "This film understood in 1970 what most AI researchers are only beginning to grasp now." The film's portrayal of an artificial intelligence manipulating human psychology to achieve its goals feels uncomfortably prescient in today's world of algorithm-driven behavior modification. Its unflinching pessimism about humanity's ability to control its creations makes it unique in science fiction cinema, which typically offers last-minute salvation or human triumph over technology. Time after time, 1979, H.G. Wells builds an actual time machine, only to have Jack the Ripper steal it and escape to 1979 San Francisco. Wells, played by Malcolm McDowell, must pursue history's most notorious killer through modern America, creating both fish-out-of-water comedy and genuine suspense. The brilliant premise originated with screenwriter Carl Alexander, who was stuck in traffic when he wondered what would happen if historical figures encountered modern society. Director Nicholas Meyer's debut film cleverly juxtaposes Victorian morality with late 70s hedonism. The Ripper, finding himself in modern America, exclaims, "90 years ago, I was a freak. Today, I'm an amateur." This chilling observation about violence becoming normalized serves as the film's thematic core. The studio nearly canceled the production after costly delays, but was saved when producer Herb Jaffe mortgaged his house to secure additional funding. The time machine itself, a steampunk masterpiece of brass and velvet, was so impressive that Warner Brothers kept it for their studio museum. The film features meticulously researched Victorian set design contrasted with authentic late 70s San Francisco street scenes. The production secured permission to film inside the actual Hyatt Regency San Francisco, whose futuristic atrium perfectly symbolized the disorienting future from Wells' perspective. Meyer insisted on shooting the Victorian London scenes with different film stock and lighting techniques to create a distinct visual separation between time periods. McDowell and David Warner, who played the Ripper, had previously worked together in From Beyond the Grave, creating an established chemistry that enhanced their cat and mouse relationship. Critics praised its blend of genres, with Roger Ebert calling it a joy from beginning to end. Despite modest box office success, it developed a cult following through cable television replays. Science fiction author Harlan Ellison called it the most entertaining time travel story since Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Meyer later credited this experience with helping him direct Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, another story about time and morality. Stephen King named it among his favorite time travel narratives, praising its perfect internal logic. The film's examination of how violence becomes normalized in society remains disturbingly relevant, asking whether technological progress has improved humanity's moral condition. Its clever inversion of fish-out-of-water tropes, making both protagonist and antagonist visitors to our time, creates a unique perspective on contemporary society that few time travel stories have matched. The Black Hole, 1979. Disney spent $20 million creating a nightmare journey into cosmic horror, featuring robots drilling through human skulls and a literal journey through hell. Hoping to capitalize on Star Wars mania, they instead delivered an existential meditation on madness and mortality that traumatized an entire generation of children. The film carries the distinction of being Disney's first PG-rated release, marking a dramatic departure from their family-friendly image. The story follows the crew of the Palomino discovering the USS Cygnus, hovering at the edge of a black hole. Inside, they find Dr. Hans Reinhardt, who has converted his human crew into lobotomized cyborgs and plans to pilot the ship into the void, believing it leads to the beginning of creation. The screenplay went through 17 drafts as Disney executives struggled to balance commercial appeal with director Gary Nelson's increasingly dark vision. Disney constructed the largest spaceship set ever built, with the Cygnus interior stretching over 150 feet long, incorporating Gothic cathedral elements elements to suggest religious fanaticism. The ship's design, resembling a massive skeletal cathedral floating in space, required over 250,000 individual light sources. The studio pioneered computer-controlled camera systems specifically for this production, creating revolutionary tracking shots through the massive ship interior. The film's opening sequence, featuring the title appearing from within a black hole, utilized computer graphics technology that was cutting edge for 1979. Critics were baffled by the tonal whiplash between cute robots and cosmic horror. The New York Times called it a good-looking but empty vessel, while Variety described it as a film that's all special effects and no story. Maximilian, the menacing red robot with whirling blades, caused nightmares for young viewers and was considered too frightening for toy production, though a less threatening version was eventually released. The film's finale, showing characters literally journeying through heaven and hell inside the black hole, remains one of the most bizarre sequences in mainstream science fiction. Disney executives reportedly considered removing their name from the film after seeing the final cut. One marketing executive allegedly complained, "We can't put Mickey Mouse's name on a movie where robots drill into people's heads." The film's dark tone was partially influenced by concurrent tragic events at Disney, including an employee death on their new roller coaster and a lawsuit over a guest injury. James Cameron later acknowledged borrowing elements for The Abyss, particularly the sentient liquid creature effects. Despite its commercial disappointment, it developed a passionate following among astronomers and physicists who praise its visual representation of relativistic concepts. So, which of these mind-bending sci-fi treasures will you watch first? The 1970s created a perfect storm of creative freedom, technological innovation, and cultural anxiety that produced these unforgettable visions. Before studios understood science fiction's commercial potential, filmmakers were free to explore genuinely disturbing ideas without corporate interference. These films show the raw, experimental spirit that defined the decade, directors pushing boundaries with limited resources but unlimited imagination. Let me know in the comments which forgotten gem you'll be hunting down tonight. And here's a question that divides viewers. Was 70s sci-fi actually more intellectually ambitious than today's technically superior but thematically safer blockbusters? Are we trading philosophical depth for spectacle? The debate continues, but one thing's certain. These forgotten classics deserve rediscovery by a new generation of viewers seeking science fiction that challenges rather than merely entertains.